welcome to this latest episode of Inspired Coach Podcast. Today we have an inspirational interview for you with the incredible Jerico Mandybur. Let's start out by learning more about them. Jerico is a 4-time author, TEDx speaker, and award-winning holistic creativity coach dedicated to helping creatives and neurodivergents divest from perfectionism and express their full selves. Being a tarot reader, meditation teacher, freelance writer, and art therapist in training, Jerico's coaching is where all these tools converge, offering an empowering and creative space for clients to unlock their unique expression and live a more mindful and magical life. Jerico's books have been translated in 7 languages, and their work has been featured everywhere from New York Magazine to LA Times, New York Times, Vogue, The Guardian, Goop, Refinery 29, the ABC, and many more. Jerico is also a proud Beautiful You coach and graduate of the Beautiful You life coaching course. I literally am jumping out of my skin to bring you this interview today. Jerico is specifically here to talk about their journey with autism and ADHD and being neurodiverse as a coach. This is an interview that no matter how you might identify and sensorily process the world and think and move through your life and your business or your desire to have a business in the future, that you are going to learn something incredible from. Jerico is so heartfelt and honest and raw, and their journey is one that is just steeped in learning and a little bit of magic and expansion and so much more. Can I also recommend that if you have not watched Jerico's TEDx talk, the title of which is "The World Needs Weirdos," that you absolutely look that up. Jerico gave that TEDx talk at TEDx Cecil Street. It is such a brilliant TEDx talk. It's all about their journey of neurodiversity and just expressing their intense desire for us as a whole worldwide collective to embrace difference, not just in neurodiversity, but just difference between us as human beings in so many different ways at such deeper levels. It's truly touching, and I cannot recommend that you watch that enough. I also want to let everyone know today, if you are not aware, that we are very busily behind the scenes here at Beautiful You preparing for our new incoming trainees in our July 2023 course. It is not far away now, and we are so excited at the journey that they are all going to be taking ahead. That course has now been sold out for some time. And if you are thinking about potentially training with us at some point in time in the future, please go to beautifulyouLifeCoachingCourse.com, where you can sign up to the waitlist. We will send you some goodies when you're on it, and get yourself prepped and ready for February 2024, which I know sounds like a really long time away, but in fact is going to be here before we know it. And look, you never know. There may also be some people who are unable to proceed with us in the July course, and a spot might come up. And if it does, it's going to be our wait list that will be the very first people that we contact about that. So if you have your heart set on trying to sneak in to July, then make sure you go to beautifulyouLifeCoachingCourse.com to get yourself on that wait list to see if that might be possible for you. For now, though, enjoy this incredible interview with Jerico Mandybur on being neurodiverse as a coach ahead. Thank you for being here. Enjoy. Jerico Mandybur, welcome to Inspired Coach Podcast. I'm always incredibly delighted whenever I get to share space with you in any form, and today is no different.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, well, I'm really excited to have you here as well. And I want to actually start out by reading everyone something from your website, because I think it just is the most perfect beginning for our conversation today. And Jerico, you say that your personal practice and worldview is informed by the autistic, ADHD, queer femme, chronically ill, and first generation immigrant experience that is a part of who you are. And I absolutely love that in your about page there, which we know is so important for us as coaches and online business owners, you're just putting it all out there. And that is just one of the things that you clearly say, this is me, this is who I am, and this is part of my lived experience. And in particular, we're here today to talk about your journey with autism and ADHD and how that influences your life and being a neurodivergent human being. I happen to know from watching your TED Talk and knowing more about you that your diagnosis of autism and ADHD is not something that has been with you your whole life. So tell us a little bit more about what it was like for you growing up, being a neurodivergent human being, but not actually knowing that.
Yeah, the experience was of just feeling really outsider. In my TED Talk, I referred to it as feeling a bit like an alien from another planet. So knowing that there was something that you were missing out on, something that you were not getting, like an unspoken set of rules, or something that was being said with other people's faces that you somehow couldn't unlock. And so really, I felt that there was just this like inherently broken, less than part of me, but I just had to get on with it because, you know, maybe it was just harder for me to do things that other people found easy, but that was like my problem to overcome. So it was very like, you know, a hyper individualistic, deficit based way of thinking that was like very hard on myself. And really, it just came from what I observed, because that's kind of how we all implicitly expect each other to behave in the world. You know, you have your private life and your struggles, and then you go out and you put on a face and you perform socially. And I found that from, you know, the earliest memories I have as a very challenging, manual, exhausting process. But, you know, because people do have this presentation, you know, this perfection that we kind of all like to showcase to the world, it's very hard to actually realize, you know, what parts of ourselves we're enacting that may not be authentic, but we all just agree that that's something that we're going to do. And I felt like I missed the memo. You know, but as I got older and received these diagnoses and learned more about myself, I realized, you know, missing the memo could actually be kind of a positive thing, and that, you know, reframing that, and especially from the position of being a coach, being able to understand how our kind of social programming works, and the cost of that is actually a really liberating piece of knowledge. And so, yes, my early years started out really tough. But I think I had to have it be that way in order to be as accepting and celebratory of my differences now.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing what I know is just a tiny part of your journey with us around that. Jericho, as an adult, what was the tipping point for you that made you seek further information and further support and help about all of the things that you just mentioned, the way that you were processing the world, the things that you felt that you were missing, the being very hard on yourself? There was obviously a time where it came to you that something needs to be attended to here for me. Something is not
Yes.
as it should be. I need support or help. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what then shifted for you?
Yeah, tipping point is such like an interesting way of thinking about it, because I just had the image of, having the same kind of lessons presented to me over and over and ignoring them until it really reached a point of no return where I just couldn't ignore it any longer. Um, so, for example, when I was in university, so I think I was about age 22, I was diagnosed with ADHD then. Um, but I kind of, in my skepticism, nihilism, whatever was going through my mind at that point in life, I just didn't really take it seriously. I didn't want to be medicated, which of course is a really personal choice, but I just almost like forgot that I was ever diagnosed as someone with ADHD, and I just kept pushing. So
Mm.
at that point, I was already, really depressed, really anxious. I had these, strong sensory challenges, social challenges. I was a wreck. And again, I was still kind of running the narrative of like, it's just me, I'm broken. Like things are really hard for me. And that's my problem to push through. So the pushing and the pushing kept happening. Um, and I kind of, entered the professional world with that agenda of like, let me push, let me prove that I can actually do this and be a kind of successful, normal, quote unquote, person. And that's what I did. And of course, that didn't fix anything. And the same sensory, emotional, physical, and, communication and social challenges were still coming up again and again. And so it got to a point where I had already left my job because I knew I was burnt out. So I already felt like I'm exhausted and I don't quite know why, but I'm going to have a nervous breakdown if I don't like put the brakes on. And really, the only thing that got me to that point of acceptance and of changing something was that physically my body was like, you cannot go on. So I was going to hospital like frequently because my migraines were getting so bad, and I was shutting down. I was finding it harder and harder to speak, to just function in those ways that I had done. And that's one of the interesting things about being on the spectrum. You might have what they call traditionally, low support needs at a certain time, but then your, functional capacity might change and those support needs might actually become higher, or vice versa. And that's part of the framework of it being a spectrum. So it's very fluid and in flux depending on how much support you have. And because I had none, because I said I didn't need any,
Mm.
it got that bad. So I was like, okay, this is something. This is like maybe a neurological issue. There's something like really significant at play. So that coincided with the pandemic, and there was a lot of stress in the collective anyway, and so it was all compounded, and it led me to get an assessment. And I was just going to get some kind of neurological / psychological assessment, but in Googling, like, what kind of assessment do I need, I came across things that were referencing, there was one article in particular in The Guardian that was referencing how autism, particularly in adults assigned female people, isn't what we think. And I read it, or actually I think my partner read it and sent it to me and was like, that's interesting, because it mentioned certain things like losing the ability to speak or having certain shut down experiences and sensory experiences. And so I chose a psychologist to have an assessment with, who was qualified to run, to look for autism. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I did it and had to fill out all these surveys, forms, questionnaires. My mum was spoke to and filled out forms herself. And of course, there was like hours of dialogue between me and the psychologist as part of that assessment. And the longer that we went through that, the more I was like, I think she might actually say that this is a real thing for me. And then sure enough, she said, yeah, you're autistic. And by that stage, I thought, okay, well, that makes sense.
Right. Okay. So by the time you went through that enormous and challenging journey, not to mention everything that had come before it, you're like, okay, this is making sense to me. I am autistic. What changed from there for you? Because I look at the person that you are now and see you, while yes, things are a spectrum and you can have high needs and further needs at any time and lower at other times. I see in many ways a thriving, successful, extraordinary coach, author, creative, speaker, someone who is studying their master's in art therapy at the moment. And it seems like some significant things have shifted since that diagnosis.
It was a roller coaster, truly, because the first thing that happened is I kind of went into mourning of what life could have been like had I known, or had I had the support that I needed earlier. And that's a really interesting kind of common theme with late diagnosed autistics. But it's the flip side of that is that if I was diagnosed earlier in life, particularly as a child, I wouldn't have necessarily had the supports anyway, because at that time they weren't there, and any that were there would have been traumatic. So the more that I learnt about that kind of hypothesis of what would have been, the more I realized it had to happen the way that it had to happen. And there were ways of thinking about that were beneficial to me. And I started to kind of move into a place of just making peace with it. And a huge kind of help in that process was just being with other autistic people. And more often than not, being with meant being online with, being in forums, in Facebook groups, reading, the writings of other autistic people, just immersing myself in the community of people that had already been there, and learning about the social model of disability, neurodiversity, as a paradigm, and how it's really, in essence, is just the acknowledgement and celebration of natural difference, as in nature, variation, adaptation. Like, we are all supposed to be different, and there are neurotypes, probably more than we even realize right now, and that we all have an important place in the conversation, in the collective, in changing the world for the better. And so that galvanized me to be like, okay, this is actually, it's about me feeling like my most, myself, truly getting back to myself, the most kind of accepting, empowered version of that. But also it's about, the people that I work with, because I was already a coach when I was diagnosed. So I felt that I had a sense of responsibility, and that kind of informed um, how I was thinking about myself, because I was thinking about what would it mean to lead by example. And I think for me, luckily, that really quickened the process of just coming to a place of realizing, like, okay, my brain functions differently. So it means that I have to behave differently. There are certain things that I have to do or not do in order to, as you say, like thrive, be in a place where I can do what I need to do and reprioritize. So everything was really up for grabs in terms of where I put my time and energy. And that was a really radical, sometimes amazing, sometimes really difficult terrain to navigate, particularly when it comes to relationships. So, for example, having to kind of step away from certain, friendships or activities that we kind of just do in life in order to kind of preserve a bit more of that time and energy. So as I was doing that, I was reading about it and learning about it from other people and having kind of conversations in real time in my life, but also really just listening and being like as observant as possible about the people, about the lives of the people that I was coaching, because one of the things that I kind of noticed after the diagnosis was that well over half of my clients had, and it may just be the way that creatives are wired, were already neurodivergent, and most prominently had ADHD and may have had suspicions in terms of other neurodivergence. So I was already kind of doing it without realizing. And that was a really nice realization to have too, because again, it meant that I had the motivation and the determination to, just empower those people in a way that will make their lives as brilliant as they can be, but also as sustainable. And that's really the goal, is just that self-preservation, that being able to do what you want to do. And it requires, a lot of examination of anything that you might have kind of put in the bucket of this is how it's done, this is how it should be done, this is how I'm supposed to do things, all the shoulds, all of it. You really, it's a hugely, radical process, and it is ongoing. I wouldn't say that I've figured it out completely, but I think that's a nice piece of it as well, is that you can always find that next layer of work and surprise yourself, in new unfolding ways. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's something that all of us as curious human beings, and particularly coaches and space holders, should want to hold dear to ourselves, and to understand that life in no way is linear, and our needs and desires and a whole range of other things are changing all of the time. Jericho, I'd love to talk a little bit further about some of the things that you're mentioning around self-preservation and sustainability, in particular in how they relate to you being a coach, mostly of clientele that, as you've mentioned, identify as neurodivergents and identify as creatives as well. And you are an incredible and very successful coach and creative, doing all sorts of writing and speaking and exploring in your own world and bringing those gifts out into the world for other people to benefit from. But as someone who is neurodivergent, you have particular needs that you need to take care of, and then further particular needs that you need to take care of as a coach and a space holder. So for you to be able to turn up the very best that you can for the people that you are supporting, Can you tell us a little bit more about what those needs are? What do you have to be really lovingly mindful of and possibly even fiercely protective of when it comes to you and how you show up as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like slowing down and not taking anything for granted as a should, so to speak, is the best thing that's been supportive to me, but it's also informed the way that I work with clients now. So for myself, I've had to really observe and audit from the moment where I had this realization about myself as being autistic until now, what certain experiences, being in certain environments, working in certain ways does to my energy. So there's a really good kind of thought experiment or practice that was super helpful to me that's called energy accounting. And it's really just the metaphor of energy as like a bank account. So you have your withdrawals, the things that drain you, the things that might take away from your energy, your life force, and that might actually, kind of increase the likelihood of the kinds of traits that you would like to avoid. So being in a state of overwhelm, essentially anything that overwhelms you and exhausts you. And then the deposits are anything that replenishes you. And so for an autistic person, that could be like engaging in your special interest. It could be stimming, which is like self-stimulatory movement. So, flapping, playing with something fidgety. But it could also just be like having a nap. So it takes time to understand what that looks like for you. And it's really a work in progress. Like I keep like a running sheet, like an audit document of what happened, what was the response, what do I then need, did I address that need or not? And yeah, that's been really supportive. But there are certain things that now I have to raise. I think that's the first and biggest part of it really, is having a conversation. So, for example, recently in starting a master's, I sat down with one of the staff there and essentially said, this is what you might notice from me. So, for example, I may not make eye contact on Zoom all the time, or I may have periods where if I'm very overwhelmed, I won't speak, in which case I'll try and let you know by email in advance, or maybe I'll do like the Auslan symbol for not speaking, in the immediate scenario. I might wear sunglasses if I have a migraine. I might wear headphones. And, yes, it takes kind of work sometimes to educate people in like what those things are. But there is no real way to create like the perfectly accessible world that we all like want and deserve without really backing yourself. And like, that's something that I'm really just beginning to do. And so knowing what I want to say, saying it at the first instance, and giving myself that, really just the legitimacy of saying like, no, this is actually important to me, because I know if I don't, for example, wear headphones, that I'm going to, go home and need to sleep for 3 days, or I'm going to go and have a meltdown. So self knowledge, but then self advocacy, and that's kind of the way that I try and model working with people on Zoom as well, because all my clients for coaching are on Zoom. So one of the first things we do is have like a similar conversation where, again, I say to them, Zoom isn't compulsory, but if you want to use Zoom, cameras aren't compulsory. Nothing is lost, in not being able to see you. But also, if you do want to see each other, I'm not going to assume anything without either talking about it or just letting it be. So, for example, if someone is looking down and doodling instead of looking at the screen, that doesn't mean anything. And like, I'm not going to make it mean anything as your coach. There is just no right way to be coached or to be a coach. So, I've had clients that have just been on the phone because I've told them, look, for me as a coach, this is just as good. And for some people, it's even better. You might be able to listen better or speak more comfortably. Um, and they'll be like, "Yep, I'm going to take you up on that." And it's a pity to think of what might be lost if we hadn't had that choice in the mix. So I think it's just all about, choice and agency and being really vocal about that and knowing that that can be like a fluid, moving piece and conversation. Because, of course, if I'm a neurodivergent coach and I'm working with a neurodivergent person, we might have needs or preferences that conflict. And so then it's like, okay, well, how can we both meet each other in a place that feels safe enough? I wouldn't even say safe because, again, we're two people with our own needs and wants and agency, and all we really can expect is that that conversation stays really open and that we're safe enough to express anything, to be able to say, stop, I'm tired, I want to do 30 minutes instead of an hour. I want to do it in the morning because I know that by the night I'm not going to be able to think straight. And I really feel like finally, I'm at a point where, as a coach, I don't think that that has any bearing on my success or on how clients see me. And the only way that I got there was through practice. Like, I had to have those conversations initially and be a little bit scared, like, oh, I'm going to lose clients. I mean, even just coming out, so to speak, as neurodivergent, I know makes a lot of coaches, including myself, scared that maybe people will want to work with me less. And, it's such a bummer to admit that. But of course, that's what's happening, inside out. There's a part of us that has that fear of being judged because we have been judged. We have been told you're a bit weird, or like we've had the experience of someone walking away from us and feeling like, what did I do wrong? And so it's a very individual, and I would say like influx approach that you constantly have to like work with, rather than have it be one and done. Because again, like, if I find myself in a place where maybe my support needs shift, I still fully expect myself to be able to be a good coach. It just means that the pragmatics of how that looks are going to have to change, and that I'm going to have to be brave enough to be like, telephone only, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there is just so much goodness in there, Jericho, with everything that you have shared, that this is not something that is ever run and done. Gosh, don't we love to try and make things like that sometimes in life? It's like, okay, this is what you do and nothing's ever going to shift or change. And that's it. It's locked. It's just, that's just not human relationships, and coaching, if nothing else, is about human to human relationships, interaction, content, conversation, expression, desires, all of those things. And we're all constantly changing and our needs are all constantly changing. But I also love the piece that you mentioned there about self-agency and how that is supportive of you as a coach and also you as a human being. But for those, and hopefully it is the overwhelming majority of people, those who are prepared to really listen and be open to that, then become educated. And instead of just staying in a lane, if they happen to be neurotypical, of really expanding their capacity to both love and engage well with neurodivergent humans in their own personal life, but also become a more open, braver, safer space holder for potential future new and current, but more so, I think, even potential future neurodivergent clients. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens through listening and learning and unlearning
Mm-hmm.
and a whole range of other things besides, and to understand that it's a lifelong journey, a lifelong journey. So thank you for all of that so much. I just have one more question for you, and it's a big one. I know. Oh, I'm about to hit you with it.
Uh-oh.
But I just can't not ask it, because I'm thinking about all of those divine human beings that are listening to this, either with suspicions that possibly they are neurodivergent and or know that they and are thinking to themselves, well, I would love to help other people with in any capacity that it calls their heart. I would love to be a coach, or that's something I would love to explore, but they're holding themselves back because of that suspicion or because of that diagnosis and thinking, well, that's not for me. I could never be a coach. I hope that in listening to somebody such as yourself, they know that that is not the case at all. And we need this beautiful neurodivergency within the coaching industry in so many different ways. What would you like to share with them? What would you like to say to anybody that is just holding themselves back or thinking that they couldn't do something like this, but deep down really wanting to?
You can do it, and you can do it in a way that is your way. I think it's really just about finding the community, the people, the spaces, the training a la biker that welcomes you just as you are. Because yes, like we're living in an unfair world right now, and not everywhere is the same level of welcoming. So just find the places that welcome and allow you to be you. And anything that I think, it's really good to sometimes block out the noise in terms of what you see other people doing and how you might interpret that as that's the only way it's done. So me, for example, I would never do like group coaching with more than 3 or 4 people, like ever, because my nervous system just finds it too edgy. Edgy is a good place to be, and now edges grow, but you don't need to, kill yourself trying to look like another coach. All you need to do is show up and say, this is who I am, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I have to offer, and make things easy on yourself. I think sometimes, and I found this, the hardest accessibility is the one that we permit ourselves. So, for example, oh, I shouldn't have to read off a written script. I should be able to speak from memory. Well, maybe you can't. That doesn't mean that your words have any less impact. So it's just really, if this lights you up and you're passionate about it, that's really contagious. And no coach is for anyone, like the people who you're for are the people who are going to, you're going to reach, they're going to find you. Our brain is so imaginative, for better and worse. And we have all these hypothetical scenarios where we think, well, okay, like imagine like what a 7-figure, like neurotypical athlete, like mother of 6, would say. And it's like, I'm not necessarily trying to reach those people. So just keep yourself grounded in this is who I'm here to serve and this is what I love. I think stay with the why. That's the biggest way to kind of anchor yourself into your gifts and your determination. And you find a way that I think that with that determination and with that why really firmly in place, it's a lot more easy to accommodate yourself and find your own path to doing the things that you want to do.
Beautiful. I am so glad I asked you that question. I am really glad. Jerico, we are so proud to have you as Beautiful You Coaching Academy alumni. Everything that you do is truly sprinkled with a little bit of magic. And that is both esoterically and also practically as well. The work that you do in the world is hugely impactful and important. You're an award-winning coach. The things that you offer and what you put out to the world truly make an impact. But I think the thing that is just so important for me to share with everyone as somebody that has known you now for a number of years is that the greatest impact that you have and you've had on my life as well is simply from being who you are and embracing all aspects of yourself and truly being somebody that is here to say, this is me. This is who I am. You can take me or leave me, love me or not, but I'm here to fully show up as myself. And that is just such an inspiration. It is so impactful. And I've just been so delighted to have you say yes and to be a part of the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, I love being here. I don't want to end.
Well, we could talk for ages and ages, but for all of you who are out walking your dog or driving the car or in the train at the moment, whatever you may be doing listening to this episode, if you have loved Jerico as much as I'm sure that you have, please make sure that you check out their work further. We will make sure, of course, that all the information is there on the website. And Jerico is one of those incredible coaches that you can touch base and learn from them in a variety of different ways. Even if you don't identify as neurodivergent and a creative and therefore would not necessarily ever be a client of theirs, books, incredible decks, tarot decks that you can buy and purchase and come closer into their world. Believe me when I tell you that not only are they completely joyful and will support you to become the person that you're on the path to becoming, but they will also give you an insight into a truly incredible coach and creatives world that will impact and influence your own coaching work in the world as well.